Estamos en compañía del doctor Patrick Meier. Did I say it right, Meier or Meier?
Either works. Both are used.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, doctor, for your time, and welcome to this interview. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk about humanitarian drones.
Thanks very much for having me, Juan, and real pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. It's been a long time coming, and thanks for having me. Feel free to call me Patrick, and thank you specifically as well for translating the humanitarian UAV code of conduct. That was really a very generous contribution.
It was my pleasure. By the way, Romeo, I mentioned that I was going to interview you, and he said send him my best regards. I think very highly of him.
The feeling is very much mutual. Thank you. Thanks for passing those on. Thank you.
Okay, so we got in touch because of the, basically because I read the humanitarian code for drones, which I found it to be very necessary. Because even in situations of when people wanted to help with drones, sometimes they don't know what to do or how to proceed. So this UAV code helps people to get in line in what is they're supposed to be doing and what they're not supposed to be doing. Now, how important is to have these protocols in humanitarian situations?
That's a great question. It's essential, but not sufficient. It's essential because ultimately we need to be able to hold ourselves accountable and to hold each other accountable to what one would hope to be, a high standard. But that on its own is not going to guarantee that humanitarian drone missions are done in such a way that they're responsible or effective. So I had high hopes, and maybe somewhat naively, despite sharing this code of conduct far and wide, and it's gotten a lot of mileage, and all UN agencies and the Red Cross and others are familiar with it. That on its own doesn't mean that anybody's going to follow it. And so what we need to do in addition is to build that expertise, work with local drone pilots, local humanitarians, help to augment their expertise in the use of drones for humanitarian action.
In your experience in all these years and all the countries, are drones actually helping, or they're just getting in the way?
That's another good question. I mean, it's a bit of both. I maybe this is me just feeling optimistic, but maybe on a bad day I would say something else. But it does seem to me that we're seeing less what I call cowboy behavior with drones these days compared to what we saw 5 years ago. Really, when you used to have fires or floods, you had a number of drone enthusiasts who would just be in the middle of the way because they wanted to get the awesome, aerial shot or awesome aerial video to then put on YouTube, and it would go viral. But what aviation authorities around the world do, what professional drone companies also do, because obviously it's in their interest that people use these technologies responsibly, because otherwise they suffer the negative consequences themselves. So I do think it's improving. At the same time, we're not there yet. It's clear that amongst too many drone pilots, both enthusiast drone pilots and professional drone pilots, I think there is this pervasive assumption that as long as I know how to fly this technology, how to operate these technologies, add value to humanitarian efforts. That's not a guarantee at all. And in fact, what I've seen and what we've seen firsthand is that some drone pilots self-deploy, are absolutely very much experts in the technology, but I think that expertise potentially makes them assume that they can be part of the solution without having had any experience in humanitarian efforts. Very, very, very few drone pilots who deploy have much, if any, humanitarian experience. And many of the humanitarian professionals who deploy have little to no expertise in drones. And so there's a complete disconnect. And that really can, for multiple reasons, can completely lead to failure, because you have drone pilots assuming and expecting certain things based on their experience. You have the humanitarians expecting, assuming different things, and it's just two different worlds. And I've seen time and time again how, and if the response is, listen, not now, then knowing that you should get out of the way and not insist, right? Because there's been some situations where some UN colleagues have told me that they get inundated in the middle of a disaster by a bunch of drone pilots, who are obviously very excited, and I would imagine, for the most part, mean well, but then they can't take no for an answer, and they just insist. And these humanitarians, you've been in crisis situations. When this all hits the fan, you're working 20-hour days. You're just trying to put out the next fire and get to the next thing. And so just to be inundated by a bunch of drone pilots, without that sensitivity, doesn't do very good for humanitarian, drone pilot collaboration.
Well, sometimes you have to push a little bit, because the people that are in charge, they don't actually understand the possibilities of the drones. So sometimes you do need to push a little bit to explain and educate, because still there is a margin of ignorance within the first responders.
We shouldn't assume that humanitarians would know what to do with aerial imagery, or any kind of data product derived from aerial imagery. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of time that we take as well in training humanitarian professionals to understand what can and cannot be done with drones, and what the data, resulting data products are most relevant, and what you can conclude and not conclude, and all that. So it's a form of it's digital literacy. It's really important that we, as the professional community of practice around humanitarian drones, work with these organizations in between disasters, and more specifically, not just training, but actually join or even run disaster simulation. Because there's this saying that responders train the way they respond, and they respond the way they train. So if you can get into their training cycle, and then next week there's a fire, they already know you. You've built some social capital, some credibility, some trust. They've gotten used to the technology. They understand what it can give you, and you start getting pulled into then the actual deployments.
To understand more, especially in this pandemic, the importance of not only drone pilots, but in general. If you want to help, you got to know what you're doing, and you have to be within the boundaries of what the authorities are doing, and subscribe to them, because we are there to serve, to help other people. That maybe we got lucky and our house didn't collapsed, but there are a lot of people, and it's an emergency, and it's a disaster situation. A lot of people are hurting. A lot of people are dead. They don't have water. They don't have electricity. And know what not to do and not to bother. You have to know what you're doing. And that's, at least basic training, or at least educate yourself by learning online and online courses that you also have, and even PDFs with information. But the pilot has to go there. It's something that you have to earn. It's not something that's given. And you have to earn that, learn that to earn the possibility, not the right, but the possibility to help.
That's so true. It requires an investment on the part of the drone pilot to do that. And I liked how you use the word serve. I think that's absolutely appropriate. It's an expression of dignity as well, that you're recognizing and respecting the dignity of affected communities by understanding that you're there to serve. And I remember when a couple of years back, the flying lab at the time, Amrita, she'd been asked by the Red Cross to deploy, literally to get on a Red Cross helicopter within a couple hours and deploy to some remote islands that had been affected by a major cyclone. Point is, she was not able to fly half as much as she expected to be able to fly to in order to provide the Red Cross with aerial imagery for the damage assessments, which the Red Cross had requested. So when she couldn't fly, she said, how else can I help? And they needed as much help as possible. So she joined them in doing, what field-based damage assessments, going door to door and assessing damage needs and so on. And the Red Cross, the local Red Cross, was so grateful. I would like to see a lot more of that, because frankly, what I have seen is drone pilots who can't fly for whatever reason, they just leave. And without even asking, like, well, is there something else that I can help you with, right? So I appreciate you using the word serve. I think that's absolutely right.